Hello and welcome back to another episode of Always Ageless, the show where we explore what it means to live fully, love deeply, and navigate life's transitions with wisdom, confidence, and heart. I'm your host, Valerie Van De Zilver, and today we're diving into something every family experiences, but few families rarely talk about openly: conflict. Not just conflict itself, but the conversations that either heal us or hurt us in the moments when we need connection the most. My guest today is someone who's devoted more than 3 decades to helping couples, parents, adult children, and entire communities transform the way they communicate. His name is Mark Oelze, author, counselor, and founder of The Pledge Talk, a framework, simple 6-step process that has helped countless people turn tense conversations and confrontations into rich, meaningful, long-driven conversations. And I'm sure that all of us listening and viewing would love to have 6 easy steps to have meaningful and heartfelt conversations with our loved ones. If you've ever found yourself dreading a conversation, and I'm sure we all have, or replaying one that didn't go so well, or wishing your family could talk about important things without turning it into a battle, especially the kinds of conversations we face around aging, caregiving, safety, and next steps, this episode is going to speak directly to you and to your heart. So settle in, take a deep breath, and join me as we discover how a few intentional steps in the way we talk can change the way we live, how we support each other, and how we love one another at any age. Mark, welcome to Always Ageless. We are so glad to have you here.
Valerie, thank you so much for the opportunity and the blessing. And we've had a couple of interchanges. I'm just glad to get to know you, and I love your heart and everything. So I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you here. For our audience and viewers, I was fortunate a few months ago to meet Mark in Wichita, Kansas. And I knew right away that I wanted to have him as a guest on our show. And before that, I had already purchased his book. So I knew him, and then I met him, and I was sold. So we're glad he's here. Mark, you teach us that most conflicts go wrong because the conversation goes wrong. No surprise. In your view, what makes a conversation feel safe versus dangerous from the very first moment?
We need to recognize the value of the other person and the value of the interchange and be careful or full of care, really, about how we interact. Mindful of that. I think all too often we just engage in conversation and won't even think about words coming out of our mouth or how it might be affecting someone. We just kind of rattle stuff off and we're not even looking at the person, or we're just kind of saying whatever comes to mind, whatever's on our heart, whatever. We just say it all, and we're not careful. We don't recognize that there's a proverb that says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue." So literally everything comes off of my tongue will bring us life. If you and I were in a conversation, Valerie, death and life, everything comes off my tongue, helps create life between us or death. So we're not careful enough.
That's profound. And yes, most of us don't think before we speak. Well, you created Pledge Talk to transform difficult conversations. So what was the turning point in your counseling career? Because I think you were a counselor at that point. So tell us a little bit about that made you realize that people needed a structured, repeatable process. I'm sure it didn't take you long to see that people needed something, but what was that point? What was it that happened?
Sure. I've been a marriage counselor for almost 40 years. And so I've seen a lot of couples in front of me try to have some sort of healthy conversation. But 4 out of 5 couples, when they come to see me, they say we can't communicate. And it takes only 1 or 2 minutes to watching them, and I see that in fact they can't. And I think, Valerie, over and over again, it was I'm not sure there was a specific point, but a gradual point in the sense of watching this take place over and over, where people want to connect. We all want to connect. We want to be heard. We want to be known. We want to be able to have good communication, but we just don't know how. And I would see over and over again, people would go one direction and it would derail the conversation. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, if they'd only done this instead, it would have helped them to go further down the track and experience goodness in their conversation, in their connection. And I do remember one night when I was like, I'd probably seen 3 or 4 couples again that day, struggling with this very thing. And at the end, I just kind of sat back and said, what is this? There's got to be, a different way of doing this. And I remember going up and talking to my wife. And later that night, we sat back and I said, honey, I think this is an area that we do pretty well. And I think we have good conversations. And even when we're in conflict, I think we do pretty well. And she agreed. And we just kind of sat back and said, what is it that we do? Can we name what we do that helps us to get from here to here in a good way, in a healthy way, in a helpful way? And we recognized that there really is a sequence of steps that not necessarily at the moment had we been conscious of them, but there's a series of steps that we had learned to take that really help us go down the track in a good way and get to a place where we want to be in the conversation. It amounted about to 6 steps. And then we thought of an acronym that we could use to remind us of the steps. And we came up with the word pledge. And we loved the acronym because, in a married relationship, we take a pledge at the altar to love one another. And I think most of us, we set out, we want to do that. We seek to do that. We try to do that. Look for ways to, maybe bring flowers home or any number of different things that we try to show love. And my fear is that the one place we don't show love near as well, in fact, we do quite poorly, is in fact in the way we communicate. So my passion is to help people. I train people how to have healthy, helpful, conflict or ordinary conversations that breathes life into a relationship and creates deeper connection rather than destruction.
But I'm sure you would say that a lot of people just don't know how. They were maybe brought up in situations where they didn't have a pattern or a good relationship. My parents I never remember hearing my mom say, I feel this way, or this is how I feel. And we do in our family, but I don't remember them ever talking like that. And so I'm sure you just must think that a lot of it just comes. I mean, do people even know where to start? What do they do when they have no background?
I think you're absolutely right. In my own experience, when I teach this, probably literally 1 or 2 out of 100 people when I teach have given me any indication. When I ask, raise your hand, was anybody ever taught or modeled, or were they trained somehow on how to have healthy conversation or to work through conflict? And maybe 1 person out of 100 raises their hand. But so literally, I don't think any of us were taught. I wasn't taught. And that's it. That's really sad and scary and a huge challenge that we face in our world and our culture, especially today.
Many people probably think they're good listeners until a disagreement happens. And then, well, I'm a good listener, but I just don't happen to want to listen to you right now, right? So what do you consider the biggest myth about listening during a conflict?
In conflict or arguments, I often think people would say to themselves, I am listening. And it one day dawned on me
Right,
that
I'm sitting here quiet, I'm not arguing with you, therefore I must be listening, right?
well, they could be saying that too. They could be saying that too. But the other thing I found out is that I think on some level they are listening, but they're listening for the wrong things. That's what's critical. Valerie, if you and I were in a conflict of sorts, right, and you're explaining to me why you were hurt or upset or angry at something that taken place between us, and if I were listening to you, the tendency on a natural standpoint is I'm listening, okay, but I'm listening to all the things where I think you got it wrong. Right? You're saying it always happens, and I'm thinking to myself, no, it didn't always happen that way. Or you're saying, last Tuesday, Mark, when you called me, and I'm thinking, no, it wasn't last Tuesday, it was last Thursday, and I'm thinking of all these things that you have wrong,
Yeah, sure. Of course.
so that the moment you're done, I jump in and I say, well, you're wrong on this account, this account, this account, this account,
Right.
and then I give my account, and the thing is, I really think I've listened, and on some level I have, but I've been listening for the wrong things. I've been
Yeah.
listening to all those things that I can find fault with you, rather than listening to understand you
Yeah.
and understand your perspective and what brought about the hurt that you're feeling. That's what I need to be listening to, and that's what we fail to do most of the time.
They need to have an understanding that they need to have an agreement that they can talk that way, that they can tell each other how they feel, right?
Mm.
And therefore, if I'm going to tell you how I feel, but then you need to listen to how I feel, right? When
And
we
say,
got married, we
understand it.
said we became one. So how I feel is how you feel because we are one unit, right?
Mm.
So
It's
one
good.
of your steps is echo. Why is repeating back what we heard so powerful, especially in an emotionally charged family conversation?
So I would say a couple reasons. One is that not only do we want to be heard, or we would never talk, right? Anytime we open our mouths to say something, we're wanting to be heard. So, but not only are we wanting to be heard, but we want to know that we've been heard, and to know that we've been heard correctly.
Yes.
We've all experienced finding out someone thought we said something when that's not at all what we said, right? So again, if you and I were in a conflict and I was explaining to you why I was upset or frustrated, my wife and I found out that one of the important steps is to echo back, so that if you could echo back, okay, then I find out whether or not you really heard correctly, which is really important in a conversation, particularly again, as you said, when emotions are charged. We want to know that we're heard correctly.
And so often someone will say, and kind of back to your previous point, is the other person will say, "You're not listening to me." And you will say, "But I am listening." And because I don't think you're listening, as you just said, to what I'm really saying, not that you called me last Tuesday or Wednesday, right? But you're not listening to my feelings, which you're unable to hear because feelings aren't heard. So, yes, this is very, yeah, very important. Very, very important. So I can see where echoing back would certainly be a way to confirm. Is it to confirm that this is what I'm hearing that you're saying?
It
Is that
confirms, yeah, it confirms to you, if I was listening to you now and I'm echoing back, it confirms to you that I heard correctly. It also helps me to know whether I heard correctly, and I need to know that. Really, in a good exchange, I need to know if I heard well, if I heard correctly, and you need to know that as well. Okay, so that does that. It also has the effect of slowing things down in the conversation, because particularly when things are heated up, things start speeding up, and then escalation goes, and things just fall apart quickly. So echoing has the effect of helping to slow things down, which is really critical in these challenging conversations.
yes, it is. Yes, yes, it is. Well, you often say that conflict isn't the problem, but it's how we converse about it.
Hmm.
And what so then, Mark, what's the most common mistake you see people make in the first 30 seconds of a tough discussion?
Again, I think we react. We're listening for that first thing about where they're off, so that we can defend. When there's tension, we don't feel safe. Even when my wife and I are in tension, there's nobody in this world that I feel more safe around than my wife. But when there's tension, my um, feeling of safety goes down a little bit still yet, right? And so we tend to just be reactive in almost kind of a defensive posture kind of a thing. And that puts us in a bad place right from the get-go.
So what can someone do to change that first 30 seconds?
So the very first thing that I suggest in the acronym of pledge, P, we say, stands for pause. So if my wife comes to me and something she's upset with me, we have this understanding because we both understand the process and how to have a healthy and helpful conversation. We understand what it takes. If she comes to me, or Valerie, if you came to me and said, Mark, I'm frustrated about this, I know the best thing that I can do is make sure I'm just going to stay in pause mode. I'm going to literally say, okay, and I close my mouth. Okay. And while I'm doing that, there's some work I'm doing inside in my heart. For instance, I might be saying, Valerie just came to me, something she's upset about, my wife did, and I want to remind myself that Valerie's a new friend. I like her, and I'd like to keep our friendship and even build a friendship. And Valerie matters to me. She has value as a person. So I remind myself those kinds of things to put me into a mindset where I want to be kind. I want to love you well, as I want to love my wife well also. A short aside. I teach pledge, right, to help people learn how to resolve conflict in a healthy and helpful way. But I ultimately tell people what I'm really, really doing ultimately is I'm teaching people how to love well in the way they communicate. Pausing is an act of love on my part rather than just reacting or rather than doing what I do here. Sometimes in my office, I have a play microphone. And if you bring up a concern, right, and I just grab it right away because I'm being reactive or defensive, that's not being loving of you, being respectful of you, honoring of you, right? So if you have the microphone, I'm going to let you have the microphone because you brought up a concern. I'm going to stay in the pause mode, which also helps us to dial down our emotions. Okay. If my wife and I suddenly find ourselves in a conflict, both of us will just say, hey, can we just stop a minute and let's just pause a moment so we can dial down our emotions. PET scans show that literally when our emotions are really high, the rational part of the brain shuts down.
Oh, interesting.
So literally, we've all said something like, or heard someone say, I was so mad I couldn't even think straight. It's true. You can't think straight because the rational part of the brain is shut down. So we have to
Interesting. That's a great point.
slow down our emotions. So we have to dial down, which enables me to think straight, think of valuing the person in front of me and so forth. Then I go to the next step, which is listen, pause, listen. And again, as we were saying a minute ago, I listen to understand what it is or to hear what it is you want me to understand. Okay. And again, the struggle is for all of us, me too. We tend to hear those things that we can point out that are wrong. But that's back when we're in the defensive, self-focused,
Yes.
when we're in the self-focused mode. Other-centered mode or valuing mode or loving mode is I'm going to stay listening so that I hear what it is you want me to understand. The next step, E, echo, then I echo back to make sure that I've heard clearly, to help you know that I heard carefully or clearly. And again, to continue to slow us down so we don't get into any reactivity. And then the next step, D, is I want to disarm the tension between us by validating your thoughts, your feelings, your concerns. So again, Valerie, if you're upset because we make this up, right? When I called a week ago and talked a little bit and so forth, and I was quick on the phone, I really wasn't paying attention, and then who knows what, I don't know what, and you just kind of felt put off or something like that, and you shared that with me. I would echo back and say, oh, when I was too quick on the phone, you felt put off. And then I would say, that makes sense. That's a point of validation. I would say, I can see what you're saying. Yes, I remember that day I was really quick on the phone, and I can see exactly why you felt like I was put off, and like you were put off, and I wasn't very kind and gracious in my conversation with you. I'm sorry. I'm validating, and that um, disarms the tension between
Sure.
us. Like there's no more reason to argue because you really feel like I understand what you're saying now.
Okay.
That brings us down to the fifth step, the step of give.
Sure.
And what that is, if you feel like I really was caring for you, that I really valued you in the first part of the conversation by staying in a pause mode, not interrupting, listening to understand what it is you wanted me to hear, echoing back to make sure I heard it correctly, and disarming the tension by validating your concerns. If I did all that well, and you felt like, hey, Mark really cares, the likelihood is that at that point, you might take the microphone and say, Mark, do you have anything that you want to share or give me from your perspective? Okay. So you might then give me a chance to share my perspective about the phone call. Okay. And then you would loop back up and pause, stay in pause mode so you don't interrupt me. You'd listen to my perspective about what happened. You'd echo back
Hmm.
and you'd disarm any further tension by validating my perspective, my thoughts.
Yes.
And the last step is engage. It's just kind of the idea of going around and around this way until we resolve the conflict.
So you talk about disarming, and that's good. And the examples that you gave of how to disarm the conversation, what those statements really sound like. Many of our listeners, Mark, are navigating age related talks,
Hmm.
driving, taking keys away, downsizing, moving, safety, taking mom's rugs off the floor, making sure that she's safe, making sure she uses a walker or a wheelchair. How can pledge talk help reduce defensiveness in these vulnerable conversations?
Mm. Several thoughts. The first is, as a caveat, I would say none of these are going to guarantee things go the way we want them to.
Well, yes, that's a realistic viewpoint.
And we know that.
Yes.
However, we also know something else. If there's the continuum of how well we can communicate versus not. Let's say over here is communicating the best we possibly can. We all know there's a continuum because we can do some pretty poor communicating way over here.
Yes.
Okay. I want to say the more that we move closest to communicating the best we can, the chances go up that things will go better between us and mom and dad
Yes.
or whoever we're caring for. I had an experience of this myself with my own mom and dad about 2 years ago.
Oh,
They were living by themselves. My dad was 89, still driving, not super well. I had been with him on several occasions when things were a little bit iffy. Okay. And I went over along with my sister, who was in town that day. And I began talking with my mom and dad about the idea that I really felt it was time to look at moving into a place where they could have assistance in their living. And we talked, and my dad tends to be the one who talks more than my mom, overshadows her a bit. And my dad began telling me why he did not want to go into assisted living, did not
of
want to
course.
give up his license and all of that.
Sure.
And was like, I think you do. And I gave him my reasons why. And he said he doesn't think he did. And we just went back and forth and things began to escalate. And I finally said, Dad, I'm 100% in a place of disagreement with you. And he said, and I'm in 100% of disagreement with you.
And that conversation went downhill, right?
That was it. We just like both froze right there for about 30 seconds until my mom said, maybe, would we like to get something to eat?
And did that help?
It helped. Helped keep the calm in the midst of the storm a
Sure.
little bit. So we all went to the table. Nobody said a word. We ate some soup, I think it was, and then left. And I didn't see my dad for 3 days. And during those 3 days, I was on pause. And I was telling myself, Mark, you handled that situation exactly opposite of what you teach people to do.
Yes, it sounds like maybe that's true.
I did.
Yes.
I did a terrible job. When my dad and I began to get into a conflict, I didn't pause then. I didn't listen to his concerns or echo back or validate his concern. I didn't do any of that. And this is the challenge of what I teach. When I teach what I do with Pledge Talk, people understand it and it resonates with them. They say, yeah, I want someone to listen to me, and echoing back at particularly in conflict, that'd be great. And yeah, I'd love to have for somebody not interrupt me all the time and to validate my thoughts. I mean, it all makes sense. I've
It
never
does.
had anybody say, it doesn't make sense.
No, and when we were together in Wichita, you may have heard Sam Craddock, who talks about um, that our aging parents deserve respect no matter how old they are. They're still human. That is her quote, is always human.
Mm.
And that we need to understand that they still want to be heard, just as we want to be heard in every conversation, so do they. And that just because they became older doesn't mean we get to be their boss,
Yeah.
and that they all of a sudden are children, because that's not the case. And that is a real challenge. You and I talked about that on the phone a couple of weeks ago.
Mm.
That how do we handle these conversations when we need to respect them? We need to respect that they are human, that they have feelings, that they have opinions, and they have their own ways of looking at things.
Mm.
And we think that we know better and that we need to take control.
Yeah.
But that's not how they feel.
Well,
So
that's
how
so
would you suggest someone handle a situation like this? Give us a couple of examples, Mark.
well. I can tell you what I did do first off, because
After
within
you paused.
after I paused for 3 days and kind of berated myself a bit for doing a terrible job, I
Yes,
knew
yes,
I knew what I had to do. So but it took me about 3 days to get there to where I really wanted to do the right thing, right?
sure.
And that's part of the
Yeah,
problem. We
yeah,
don't
yeah,
want to do the right thing.
right. Yes.
But I got there. 3 days later, I went back over to my parents' house. They invited me inside, thankfully. And I sat down with my dad and I looked at him, Dad, and I said, Dad, first of all, before I say anything else, I want to apologize. I said, Dad, when I was here 3 days ago, we got into a conflict and I was interacting with you in ways that I tell people not to do. And I did a very terrible job. And I'm sorry. I came in here 3 days ago telling you what I think you ought to do. And I didn't give you a time of the day. And I didn't listen to you and your thoughts and your concerns. And if you're okay, if you'd be up to it, I'd love to do that today. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your concerns, your fears about moving into a place where you would have assisted living. And I just got quiet and I listened. For the next half hour, all I did was listen. Maybe echoed back a little bit, maybe validated a little bit, but I did not pick up the microphone to say anything from my perspective at all. I just listened.
And did he talk? Did he share his feelings?
He did. He shared with me his concerns. One of them that I hadn't even thought about was that he just said, when I hear people moving into an assisted living place, it seems like what I hear over and over again is it's just not long after that before they die. And I just don't want to do that. And I heard, oh my word, this idea, this thought, and the pain and the fear and the concern. Like I had never I hadn't thought about that. And I thought to myself, oh, it totally makes sense. And so I was able to hear that, echo back, and validate that, and say, Dad, that totally makes sense. I hadn't thought that. I can appreciate that. Oh my word, yes, I can see why that would be something that would cause you to be really hesitant in doing that. That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
And
When my dad was alive, he felt like he needed a chair, a recliner chair that was meant for an older person, and I looked for them like on Craigslist, a place where I could find a used one because they're so expensive.
yeah.
Find a used one, and Mark, the ones that were on there were, I bought this for my dad and then he passed away. I bought this for my grandma and then they passed away. I bought this for my mom. And I said to my husband, I don't want to buy one of those because whoever gets one of those, they die. Right.
Mhm.
And so I can see why, how those thoughts get into someone's mind. And I don't
Yeah.
want one of those. And I bought my dad one and he passed away. Right?
Oh,
Well, of
yeah.
course, it was gonna happen anyway, and I'm sure it wasn't related, but I can see, how of course, so then it would be our job as senior home coaches to say to your dad, "But look at all the things that you get to experience there,
Yeah.
the freedom you have. You don't have to mow your lawn anymore and all those other things." So the other side of the conversation.
Yeah. And that's true. That's the thing. There is the whole other side, right? And
Yeah,
and that's what I came in 3 days prior, just throwing out all the good things, but he wasn't there yet. He wasn't
yeah,
here ready to hear them because he didn't feel like he had been heard yet himself or understood, or he and as a result, he wasn't even able to perhaps put into words his own concerns.
yeah.
But giving him the space and time to do that enabled him to say what his concerns were and then gave him time to process. Because interestingly enough, then it was 3 weeks later, my dad called me up
Oh,
out of the blue and said, "Hey, Mom and I've been thinking, and maybe we do need to talk to that lady." He was referring to Catherine Ambrose because I had
oh,
connected with Catherine around that
sure.
time and stuff, and I'd mentioned
Yes,
her to them and stuff. And he
yes,
said, "What's that lady's name again? Maybe we do need to connect, and maybe we do need to think about assisted living."
sure.
He came to that himself because I had gone back first to hear him out, enable
And
him to
the
process and
opportunity.
consider and think about it,
Yeah,
which made
and
all the
giving him
difference
the
in the world
opportunity.
for him.
Sure. Yeah, and giving him the opportunity to be heard and to share his feelings, which are so important to him. Let's talk about sibling disagreements. How messy they can get, and do get, especially when it comes to the caregiving and financial and housing arrangements for their parents. How can siblings use pledge talk to stop fighting with each other and start addressing the real problems? Is it even possible for siblings to come together?
Well, yes, it is.
Well, that's good to hear. That's encouraging.
No, I absolutely believe it is. I believe it's possible for any of us to really work through our differences, even on a grand scale. We live in this world right now where we're so polarized in our nation politically and so forth. And one of the things that grieves me the most is that we don't see any modeling of our politicians where they sit down at the table to learn from each other. They're only arguing their own point and bashing the other person's point.
And
And
then
I
they get up,
think,
walk out of the room, right?
yeah,
Then they just walk out of the room. Right?
and it just like so aggravates me. We're not learning together as a nation when we need to. We're in a place where we need to learn to do this. Okay, I could talk about that for a long time, but
Well,
to
you know what?
answer,
Let's just interject a thought here, Mark. Let's send them your book. And at any time when we have an inauguration of any new politician, let's send them your book and tell them that you are available for a free consultation.
I'd love to do that.
Help them learn to talk to each other. And now
And listen and learn.
let's go back to
Yeah.
your topic. So
So the
when you,
siblings.
the siblings, yes.
So yes, absolutely, we can learn. We can come together and work on things, but there's going to have to be certain things that are understood, that we agree on. Things like, again, that we might tell ourselves when we're kind of in the pause mode, that we can speak out loud, and that is we need to start by saying, hey, we're family. Okay, we need to start way back here and say, hey, before we try to figure all this kind of stuff out, can we just pause a moment and say, hey, we're family. I know we've had our differences. I know we haven't always got along. I know someone's hurt so and so and so and so. But the truth is, we're family. Could we, like, I'm pretending like it's happening right now. Say, could we just like stop a moment and look at each other and say, sis, I know you and I've had differences and stuff, but I'm grateful you're my sister and that you're my brother. And I know it's been not always been the best in our family, but I'm glad I have family. And I want to keep us, and with mom and dad nearing the end of their years, perhaps on earth, perhaps all we're going to have is each other. And could we agree to work together on us, that maybe we can become even stronger as a family?
Mhm. Yeah.
I'd love to start there.
That would be a great start to any family conversation. Would even be great if they have those conversations before they get in front of mom and dad, before they say, when we get there, this is what we need to do. And we've had that conversation where I've shared with my siblings, look, when mom is gone, then we're all that's left. We have each other. And do we want to be family? And do we want to continue to get along? And if so, we need to get along now because we need to get along later, right?
Perfect. That's beautiful. Absolutely. Just like that. Just like that. Valerie, yeah.
Good points. Good points.
Then I
So
would go
there's
to,
somebody else who needs to receive your book. We need to pass those out to everybody we know and help them. These are good conversations. So
yeah.
what do you tell someone though when they say, well, I tried listening and being calm, but the other person isn't even willing to have a healthy conversation?
Mhm. There's so many moments and questions and conversations like this that would, yeah, there's about 100 different scenarios, or 500 different scenarios that I would love to comment on. Let me come back to that moment, Valerie. Maybe just pop back just a minute longer to go back to the other question of the sibling when we're having the difficulties. What if we could talk about a family unit, the importance of it first off, and then say, one of them says, some says, again, this is me touting my book or my ideas a little bit, but let me do it if I may. Somebody says, I read a book, okay, and I learned that there's a process. And again, it's a process. I didn't create the process, right? I learned the process just by watching couples, what they're doing wrong, and noting what it is that if we do this and this and this and this, things go better. That's all I did. I just noted it and wrote about it. And so anybody that I teach this to, they recognize the importance of it. So what if one of the family members says, I read a book, learned this process. Could we all agree on a process by which we're gonna work at communicating with each other that could help us as we face some of the difficulties we're going to face with mom and dad? Maybe everybody says, well, yeah, I guess so. Let's learn the process. I have a friend who has done this with all of his family and friends and cohorts. In fact, he has literally himself taught over 200 people this process because he wants his entire world around him on a same kind of a page, understanding this process, knowing that at any given time, there's going to be conflict with anyone. And if we could all agree to use this, it could be really helpful in our conversations, in our relationships. So what if a family said that, they all learned it, and they kind of use that as a foundation to help them as they go forward, working through some of the difficulties that they're going to face? I think it'd be beautiful.
Or wouldn't another opportunity be to say, look, let's just try this now. If we don't want to do this after mom or dad is gone, that's okay. But let's just try to behave this way while we're having these conversations in front of our parents, right? Because that's what they would want us to do, right? Your mom wants to think that she raised children who love each other, who respect
Mm,
each other, that she did a good job. If you don't love me after mom's gone, that's another story. But right now, let's just try to get along and have healthy conversations.
sure, sure. I would hope it'd be beyond that, but we've got to start somewhere.
Sure, sure, sure. But who knows?
Yeah,
So, and then, like I said, you've got the situation where someone said, "Well, I tried listening, but they wouldn't listen, right? They wouldn't calm down. I was trying to listen, which means obviously, right, that I was quiet for 30 seconds or less. I was listening, but then I couldn't wait because they weren't doing their part. So that's a
yeah.
challenge,
And that is a challenge. And I think, Valerie, you probably hit it on the head that likely that's true. Yeah, I listened for 30 seconds,
or less.
and or less, and didn't really do the work that this takes. It's simple for me to lay out what this process is like. To actually do it takes a lot of personal growth and personal work and determination to do what is good and right and healthy, that ups the chances things will go better in our relationship, and ultimately on some level be easier, even though in the process it's difficult and hard. But I tell people, yes, it's difficult and hard, but it's, in my mind, a whole lot more difficult, a whole lot harder to be in a relationship of constant conflict and destruction, where we don't even want to see or talk to each other. That to me is a whole lot harder
Yes, and painful.
and painful.
So
Yes.
painful. So painful. And
Oh,
who wants to live their life that way?
yeah, yeah,
Who wants to? Even if you need to part ways or something, there's just to do it in pain is not a good thing to do. It would seem to me. But
yeah.
you write about love being the motive behind effective conflict resolution. So what does love in a hard conversation actually look like in practice?
Mm. So I just use the idea of, I'm not going to say a lot again about that, but one of the main things I talk about the idea is, um, it's learning to value the other person above yourself at any given moment in the conversation. Stephen Covey said the idea of seek to understand first and then be understood. Right? That's the whole idea. Valuing the other person at the moment. When I'm listening to someone, again, the tendency is we're in a conflict situation and both of us come to the table and both of us want to be heard. Both of us are trying to get the other person to hear us. Where Stephen Covey says, and I would say, love means being willing to put my stuff aside for the moment, up on the shelf, maybe not under the rug, but up on the shelf. Okay, where I can pull it down at the right time if I still want to. But at the moment, I'm going to value you above myself and say, Valerie, you've got some concerns. I want to volunteer to listen first because you matter. Um, and I want to show you love in that manner by being willing to listen first and value you above myself.
But that is so hard sometimes, Mark.
That's the hard work that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It is, but it's the best work.
Many couples, either the aging parents or the adult children like us, have long histories of unresolved issues. How can Pledge Talk help these people have a new kind of conversation after years and years of being stuck?
Mm, yeah, yeah. Again, so many different components, but one of the first things that strikes me is we are like we are because of our past. Our past story affects our present story. It just does. It's true for all of us.
It does.
We sometimes don't want to think like that or believe that, or we want to deny that. But my experience throughout my life, in my own personal life, looking at things in my past has still has an effect on me today at various levels, and working with all the people, I have thousands of people. Our past story affects our present story. And so if, whether it's my wife and I, or a friend of mine, or a sibling, or somebody else, and we're not doing well, we might just need to say, could we just take some time to listen to each other's story? Remember, one of the first really difficult cases that I had. So I had a woman come into my office, had been significantly abused growing up. I didn't know her story. I had just heard a little bit ahead of time. And she came in, and I asked her how I could help her, what she would want to talk about. And she sat there, and she made all these facial expressions attempting to talk, but couldn't get any words out. About a minute or two into it, I just said, that's okay. Take your time. I'm here, and I'm just listening. And she did that some more and kept trying and trying. And it was about 10 minutes later, still hadn't said a word.
Really?
And I just commented the idea that I know sometimes when we're going through some really difficult times, I made some kind of comment that it's really hard to share. And I get that. It's totally understandable. And I'm not in a rush at all. And we'll just take our time. And we continued to go on that for the whole hour. She never said a word. And at the end of the hour, I told her I was so glad she had come. I knew how difficult it was. And I know how difficult it can be in life to really open up with someone you don't know and so forth. And I said, would you like to come back again? And she just,
And did she?
and she did.
And did she talk?
About 15 minutes into the second hour, she began to talk.
Uh,
Yeah. And tell me her story. And spent the next couple of years learning her story. So listening to someone's story and be willing to take the time, because we all have a story. It affects our present story. And we don't take near enough time to just patiently walk alongside of someone um, and take the time, whatever time is necessary, to really seek to understand another person and where they're at, why they think the way they do, feel the way they do, and so forth.
Mark, have you seen Pledge Talk change the culture of an entire family? Can you share a story that illustrates that transformation?
We have some beautiful, they've become friends. A couple here in Wichita who have gone to several of the conferences where I teach this. I often will go to churches and do training for married couples or families, something like that, or I've done businesses and schools, organizations, all kind of stuff. But they'd come to several conferences when I had my wife and I were teaching this, and they really saw it. They got it. They began to really work at it themselves, began teaching their kids. And to this day, they've got 5 kids. And we were with them just probably about a week ago. And I said, okay, kids, tell me what pledge means. And one at a time, the kids started telling me all the different steps of pledge. And I know they use it as a family because I hear stories all the time. The kids use it with each other. The kids use it with mom and dad using it. It's absolutely changed the culture of their family, they would say. It's a beautiful thing. It's such a fun and delight to see them do this and hear about it and so forth.
Yeah, this is great. If you, but so Mark, for someone who's listening, one of our listeners or our viewers who are listening who fear confrontation, and we know there are people who do. I hate confrontation. I would give, I would give and give and give if it meant I didn't have to have confrontation. Right? And I'm sure that you've seen other people like that. So, what would you say to help them feel empowered instead of intimidated by tough conversations?
Yeah. So just to say a little more, I think Valerie, probably most of us don't like conflict, right? I have to tell you, I don't like conflict. Okay. So most of us are in that boat. I think there's a couple of reasons we fear it. One is, again, because of our past experiences. What we've seen around us or experienced has not been good. It's been hurtful, it's been damaging, it's been frightening. So, of course, we're going to shy away from conflict and be afraid of it. From that standpoint, we need to begin to hopefully get some new experiences that are not so bad to help us to have a little bit more courage and less angst over the idea. But the other thing is that the other reason I think we're afraid of it is because we just don't know what to do when it happens.
Yes,
We really don't know what to do.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah. And so I tell people, if you learn a process, and if you don't want to learn pledge, learn something else. I think you ought to learn pledge, but learn it and teach those around you. Again, as my friend has, his family, his friends, cohorts, everybody, teach those around you so you all have a language, an understanding of what a healthy and helpful conversation looks like. And now that we know that, that can help lessen anxiety for us all. And it can lessen my own personal anxiety because now I know what to do. When my son comes to me and he's upset about something, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly what to do. I pause, I listen, I echo back, and I disarm the tension by validating his concerns.
Mm-hmm.
And he knows to do the same with me. And because we both know that together, it lessens our anxiety. And we're both committed to using the process. It lessens anxiety, enables us to move forward into even the difficult conversations in a good way.
We have 1 minute left. If listeners could improve one daily conversation habit starting today, what would you recommend and why does it matter so much?
I think I've heard numerous people saying literally that the first step of pausing could be the most helpful. Just to start with, because it would keep them from being reactive, which sends things, you know, off into really a bad direction immediately. So if you can just learn to pause and dial down, remind yourself of the value of the person, the relationship, and so forth. First and foremost, start there. It can help a long way.
Mark, you've got a book, you have a course, you have a workbook, I think, that goes with your book. So we are going to post that here and we're going to offer it to people. But would you like to tell people really quick where to find you?
So that my book that I have here called The Pledge of Lifetime is a story I wrote of a couple struggling in their marriage. They go see a counselor and he teaches them the process. And you got to get a back seat to the whole experience of seeing how they learn it, how they wrestle with it, how they do poorly with it, and then come around, and it helps bring them around to a good place. That's a good place to start. You can find that and the workbook on Amazon. And you can find me and the free video series right now. That's still free, a 6-step process. It's not free for how long, because we're turning some things around here after the first of the year, but it's still free. You can go to pledgetalk.com.
So
Pledgetalk.com.
our listeners and our viewers, go grab it now. You heard it first here on Always Ageless with Valerie V. This has been a powerful conversation. Mark, you reminded us of something incredibly important today, that conflict is not the enemy. Silence is, assumptions are, and the way we talk to one another, especially in these most tender moments of life, can either build a bridge or build a wall. And to our listeners and our viewers, you don't have to master all 6 steps all at once. You just have to take one loving step toward understanding. So whether it's with your aging parents, whether it's your siblings, whether it's with people at work, and if today's episode resonated with you, we'd love for you to share it with your friends, with anyone you know and work with. And remember that, because the more we talk with love and the more we get to live truly always ageless. I'm Valerie Van De Zilver. Until next week, stay curious, stay connected, stay beautifully ageless. Send us your comments, your questions. We read and respond to each of you. And there's also, we'll have a place where you can watch this again and hear all that Mark has to share, and buy his book. I've read it and it's a great book. Thank you very much, Mark, for being our guest. To our listeners and our viewers, we'll see you again next week.